So, I wanted to talk about coronavirus today. So I'm gonna just I'm gonna watch a debate on coronavirus. Um, there's just so much bad information out there on this topic. There's so much, again, like it's not even always about the data; it's about the reasoning. So, uh, well, there's a meme going. Actually, I wonder if I can find the meme. But I saw a meme that was basically it was like um now that I got this coronavirus shot, I'm immune, right? And the doctor goes, no, you can still get it. And it's just like whoever like thinks that that's an impressive argument doesn't have like the self-reflection to doubt and say like, wait, do I know what immunity is and what that entails? Because going to look it up would verify that there's something really wrong with uh, that person's idea of what immunity is and means, and the fact that they would try to portray a doctor as saying, no, it doesn't make you immune. So no, any doctor that said that would also not understand immunity, which is why they usually don't. Um, yeah. So really, if anything, the doctor may say, yes, you are immune. That doesn't mean you can't get it. That would actually be the accurate statement. The other thing is about whether or not it came from the lab. And I was disappointed to hear Jon Stewart just say so matter of fact that it seems evident to him that it came from the lab. And again, the reasoning is pretty specious as far as I understand. He was saying that the name of the lab was the had novel coronavirus in the title, which I couldn't find. Maybe I was just bad at researching it. But the idea is that research facility in Wuhan, is experimenting on gain of function. They're messing with viruses and specifically studying how to increase or to change the function of viruses. And these things are all over the place in the world. And that is admitted, like that's an issue. I don't think that there are going to be a lot of people who are thinking about the ethics of the situation. I don't think there are a lot of them that are going to say like, this isn't necessarily a good thing. We really need to think about this. But the idea is that this place in Wuhan was studying the novel coronavirus. Therefore, obviously, it came from that lab. And I'm not here to say, by the way, what happened or where it came from. I will advocate on behalf of the virologists that I've talked to, and listened to and whatever. They all seem to be strongly indicating that there's usually telltale signs in viruses when they've been actively modified as opposed to gains of function or mutations occurring naturally. And the consensus to me seems to be, I would be interested in any information saying otherwise, that but the consensus seems to be that it doesn't look like it's a virus that's been actively modified by humans to gain function, that it happened naturally. Now, whether or not it did in fact, whether or not the mutation happened in the wet market, whether or not someone carried it into the lab, there are things we now know that that people either mistakenly or unknowingly, or there's also potential that they lied. There are people that brought the coronavirus into the lab, and it's possible that somebody carried it from a wet market into a lab and that it mutated there, or there's lots of possibilities when it comes to that. And so I wouldn't, like, my position is just I don't know. But the issue with the argument that Wuhan, it studies the coronavirus, and it's just like, yeah, but it's also in a lot of different locations. So that's the issue. If you want to say, well, obviously the coronavirus is in this location where they study the coronavirus, and it's just like, yeah, one of the reasons that they study the coronavirus is it's so prevalent in that area. So it's, and again, you can think of analogies in which, like, we would readily notice the flaws in that type of thinking. Like, if the flu mutated, right, and there was a research facility that was researching gain of function in the flu virus, right? The flu virus has some mutation that becomes difficult to deal with, but also in the surrounding area, it's just a high amount of flu, which is one of the reasons why the research facility is there, because the virus becomes easy to access. Then we would understand that, like, you can't really draw the conclusion that it definitively came from the lab, because the area itself is having issues. And you can even imagine a situation in which the flu is manifested in so many places in this area because there aren't vaccinations. There's nothing to, like, temper or restrict the flu. There's a lot of bad practices that would certainly cause flu mutations. Then at that point, you can't really just look at this one piece of information and say, well, they're studying the flu at this lab, so it had to have come from the lab. It's like, well, no, the surrounding area has an issue with the flu as well, so it could have also come from the surrounding area. It could have come from both. But who knows? I've briefly heard some people say that you may mutate the coronavirus may have been mutated and, like, you wouldn't know. And I haven't looked too much into that, but of all the virologists I've seen, they've given compelling arguments and reasons as to why it's pretty evident when something's been manipulated in the lab versus when a mutation has happened naturally. So, yeah, stuff like that. It's just like, I'm disappointed to see Jon Stewart just didn't think about that more. And that also, the specific video I watched, he was with, who was he with? I can't remember his name, but I was also disappointed to see that he wasn't challenged at all, because that did not mean that. He said it was in the name, so maybe I need to do more research on that. I couldn't find anything in the name of the lab that indicated that it was specific to gaining. But even if it was, it's like, in that area, coronavirus is everywhere. It's in a lot of different locations. So it's also like, it just seems at that point you just have to say, well, who knows? We don't know. Just say you don't know, right? It could have come from the lab. It could have originated in the lab. It certainly seems to have been in the lab, so that's even stronger evidence that maybe it did come from the lab. But when you have a situation in which it's everywhere in the area, not just the lab, that seems like you should have taken that into consideration and not been so avid that, of course, it came from the lab. It's just like, it's everywhere. So to me, it's just like, of course it came from the wet market. We know that coronaviruses were in a specific species of bat, and that those bats were sold in the wet market. So of course it came from the wet market. Like, I could do that. I'm not doing that, by the way. My point is, that would be unreasonable to do. But I want to see, this is specifically, are the numbers exaggerated? I've heard some of the arguments about this. I've heard Steven Crowder talk about this, and so I want to analyze what's going on here again. Again, the point, the reason that I'm doing this is to hopefully get people to understand or recognize that it's often beneficial to spend more time trying to analyze the reasons that people believe things as opposed to getting into the particularities of the data. So instead of just looking at the information, I give my information, you give your information. Okay, why are we saying that the information even proves the claim that you're saying it proves? Because a lot of times, if you just think about it enough, it becomes evident that the data actually doesn't even prove the claim, so it doesn't really even matter whether the data is true or not. Usually people want to like falsify, they want to discredit each other's data, or they just want to discredit the data of the other person and say that their data is awesome. And it's just like a lot of times it doesn't even matter because your data doesn't even prove your claim. So it wouldn't matter if every piece of data that you gave was true. It would not lead to the conclusion that you wanted it to.
Politics, and religion. And we want to let you know, no matter what walk of life you're from, we hope you feel welcome. And want to let you know as well, if you love juicy debates, if you are sick in the head like us and you like these controversial topics, want to let you know we have many more to come. So I would suggest, if you'd like reminders of future debates, including next week, Matt Dillahunty will return facing Ben Fisher on whether or not there is evidence for God. Hit that subscribe button if you want a reminder of debates like that. Also, very excited to let you know, if you still haven't heard, somehow, we at Modern Day Debate have invaded the podcast world. So this is an addition to the YouTube channel. If you can't find us on your favorite podcast app, let us know. We will work hard to get on there for you. And with that, very excited to introduce our guests. First, I'm going to give you a brief layover of the actual format, then give them a chance to basically let you know what could you find at their links. They're both linked in the description. What are you waiting for? You can click right now. So for the format, though, it's going to be roughly 10 minutes from each side, kind of laying out their general position, then open conversation for about an hour, followed by Q&A for about 30 minutes. If you have a question, feel free to tag Modern Day Debate in the live chat and
what am I doing?
Ask
we
your
don't
question.
Need to listen to this.
Also, Super Chat's an option if you want to back team.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I've missed being on the channel. I kind of took a position on not debating on any other channels. Unfortunately, it was nothing in offense to you or anything. I just needed to kind of rebring myself back together and get my own channel in order and everything. And it's at that time. It's time for me to step back out and get back out into the debate scene. And I appreciate these opportunities. Now, are we doing our intros here?
Oh, what I'll do is I'll kick it over to Alex to just let people know what people could find at his link as well, and then I'll get you guys started with those 10 to 12 minute openings.
Okay, well, like I said, for those that don't know me, I'm Team Skeptic. I deal with mostly science-denying flat Earth idiots, but recently on my channel, I've turned my attention to science-denying anti-maskers and COVID deniers. Unfortunately for tonight, I'm not sure what side of retardation my opponent stands on, but if you're an anti-masker or COVID denier, then in my opinion, you might as well be a fucking flat Earth idiot.
Very juicy. And with that, we'll kick it over to Conspiracy Castle as he returns after having a good tussle with Tom Jump. Glad to have you back, Conspiracy Castle. What can people expect to find at your link in the description? And thanks for being here.
Well, I appreciate it, James, and thank you, Team Skeptic, for coming here and debating me. But, my channel is a lot more positive than Team Skeptic's. So I just try to reveal truth because we live in a world that are based on fundamental lies. And the coronavirus is just a perfect example of those lies. So on my channel, you're going to get a lot of anti-mask coronavirus stuff. So exactly what Team Skeptic.
I'm not exactly sure what he means by this world is built on a bed of lies. That would be interesting to get into and see why. What does that mean that the world is built on a bed? I understand the emotional reaction it can spark in people, and also a lot of people when they're talking about this are emotional. Team Skeptic seems emotional. It's again not the route that I try to take, at least in verbal conversations. Usually I do get aggravated online, but that's why I'm doing this, because I think it would be a lot easier for me to stay calm and kind of actual verbal talk. But yeah, let's see what else he has to say.
Doesn't but I think that's good, the yin and the yang. I actually appreciate his opinion and I respect it, and it sounds like he's already mean, already, calling people retarded, which I understand,
Not nice.
I get it. That's his opinion, but I don't think anybody's that. And I respect your opinion, Team Skeptic. So I'm really excited to do the debate. And if you guys want to find me, you can find me at conspiracycastle.live is my website. And, it's a positive channel trying to help people wake up from the fundamental lies we live in.
You got it. Thanks so much. And with that, we'll kick it into the opening statements. Team Skeptic has volunteered to go first. And with that, team, the floor is all yours.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I do appreciate this opportunity, as I said. The virus known as SARS-CoV-2, responsible for the disease known as COVID-19, is indeed real and not a hoax, and is supported by an extensive amount of scientific data and research. So that's what we're going to start with today, with the data and the science. We will do this by examining the timeline of events as they unfolded in early 2020 globally, and comparing graphs regarding the spread in countries that took this virus seriously from day one versus our own country, which has been plagued by science dissidents like my opponent tonight. Our pandemic timeline will start at the end of December. Okay, we're going to get right into it. I've got some evidence to show for anything I assert tonight, and I would expect my opponent to be the same way. Give me 1 second to open this up. Okay. All right. So here we go. This is the beginning of the evidence. So it all started in at the end of December when Wuhan, when one of the let me get back to my thing. So
1 second.
This would be.
Pardon my interruption, team. We can't see yet if you have a screen share on right now.
Oh, I'm presenting it. It's not. It's through my camera.
Oh, okay. No problem.
Presenting it through my camera. Yeah. Okay. So. Our pandemic timeline will start at the end of December when the Wuhan Municipal Health Commission reported a cluster of unidentified pneumonia cases. The WHO is the World Health Organization and is independent. And this is important. It's independent not only to the United States, but to all other governments. I say that because the WHO first acknowledged publicly that the existence of COVID-19 in this tweet right here on January 4th, and it reads, China has reported to the WHO a cluster of pneumonia cases with no deaths in the Wuhan Hubei province, which has followed by this publication on their website on January 5th.
1 second. So sorry, team, to interrupt. I'll give you the time back, I promise. I only have a black screen where your camera is. When I switch it...
Okay. Hold on. Let me see if I can fix that real quick. It's because it's Zoom, and hold on 1 second. All right, that should fix the problem right there. Is that correct? Do you now see something?
I think it's wrong screen.
I see me.
That's fine. There
that's
it
just
goes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's just my thing. Okay. So let me just. I don't need much more just to back up and show. This is the actual tweet from Twitter, from the WHO, dated January 4th. This is the first public recognition by the WHO of the virus coming from Wuhan. Okay. So let me get back to it real quick. And then this was their immediate publication. Okay. So originally it was thought to be some sort of pneumonia. And of course that is with what the symptoms are for COVID-19. This is a common diagnosis, so give me 1 second to get back to my notes. All right, which let's see. On or around January 12th, China sequenced the viral genome and offered the data to the world, which was then independently confirmed by labs across the globe, like the Institut Pasteur, who was the first institute in Europe to sequence the virus from their own source and confirmed it against Wuhan's data on January 29th. Here is the article about their sequencing, and it includes...
And just real quick, I'm seeing that I didn't update the title. Can I do that, or is it going to mess everything up? I'm going to try it. I guess this is a learning experience. Okay. Yeah, also next week I'll be sharing a video on Tuesday because I'm going to be talking to another person who does stuff like this. Just thought I'd mention that. Let's go back to the video now.
Links to the methodology they used and everything like that. All right, and this following picture right here, all right, is the genetic sequence of the novel coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2. We actually know the exact genetic sequence of the virus. Since then, many countries around the world on different continents and independently from one another, both geographically and politically independent, have managed to get the same genetic sequence from people infected with SARS-CoV-2. All right. This body of evidence from around the world supports my assertion that the virus is indeed real and destroys any suggestion that this virus was made up as some sort of hoax.
Okay, so I might be confused about what this debate is about. I mean, I don't care because I would actually prefer to listen to something like this, but I thought this was just about the numbers, but apparently the other person potentially believes that it's not real at all. I guess we'll see what his argument is.
Now let's take a look at some graphs. For this part of the presentation, I'm going to show a clip from Thunderfoot's video titled, "Is China Hiding a Massive Death Toll from Coronavirus?" And you can find this video on his website or on his channel, Voice of Thunder. All right, I'm just going to play a little 2-minute clip from his video. Okay, let me bring the audio in here for you guys.
We'll take a look at South Korea, who were also very much on the ball for getting on top and shutting down the coronavirus cases.
It's very quiet, so I'm going to try to interpret some of what's being said.
Let's take a look at their data chart. On the first couple of weeks after you impose the quarantine, you go into this loop. A couple of weeks after.
Oh, you're not hearing anything?
Barely.
Okay.
I made my video.
Hold on, you should be. Yeah, she should be. One second. Let me route this audio in here. Make sure you're getting it right. Yeah, sorry, not the biggest fan of Zoom. So. All right. Oh, wow. It says you should be getting it. It's not coming through. It wasn't coming through. My audio wasn't coming through.
No, but
okay, that's not a problem. Yeah. Well, every time I bring this back up, it will. But okay, so I'll just narrate this. Okay, I'll just narrate it from what he's saying. I'm sorry that it's going to run my time a little bit longer for having to fix this. But okay, so this is South Korea's data right here that shows that that there was an original like exponential growth, and then once they conducted the quarantine, it then began a linear advancement. So it's no longer growing exponentially, it was growing linearly. And then this is the Chinese data, which is basically showing that as soon as when China realized that they were dealing with a pandemic, they also instituted a massive quarantine. The idea here is to show that when the virus was taken seriously, when it's not treated as a hoax, then there is a particular type of, there's a particular type of increase in cases, whether it be exponential or logarithmic. I mean, exponential or linear. I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, so we have an argument here, which I do naturally agree with. And it's that, again, I'm not sure what the other person's position is. I thought this was just about whether or not the numbers were exaggerated. But, the coronavirus, I actually need to learn how to say the names properly, the difference between the contraction and the actual virus. But the novel coronavirus, let's call it, exists because there are measurable repercussions on the amount of people who get it. So if you can measure a certain population of people who are getting a virus, then that virus exists. And if a virus if you can his first argument was that we know the actual genetic information, the genetic makeup of the coronavirus. So uh, if you know the DNA sequence of a specific species, then that species exists. That's seems like a kind of a one to there's a bit of a kind of a tautology there again, and it's just like saying um, well, maybe a little bit like DNA exists, and so if animals have a specific like animals that exist with a specific DNA sequence exist. Like there's really just no way around it. So I can't see any issues with that argument. It's just like we know specifically what the DNA sequence is. We know what it's um, yeah, we know it's DNA sequence. So it is doing that adds validity to the thing's existence. It's like if you wanted to prove an individual exists, you could not only notice you would be able to notice um, it would add further evidence to that person existing in some way if when you did DNA sequencing on them, they clearly had a genetic makeup that indicated markers of two other people existing as parents, and then also that individual having their own unique markers that come through genetic mutations. So not only do you have the evidence of the genetic sequence existing of two other parents, but also that individual's unique genetic sequence. So we are noticing the unique genetic sequence of COVID-19, so it exists. And then also we can measure that virus in people. And as people distance from each other, knowing how COVID spreads, there's a plateauing of people who get it. So again, that lends to a virus that is transmuted through like droplets, through saliva droplets, or through aerosolized droplets. It lends to that thing actually existing.
Or linear. And countries like South Korea and China did take this seriously. And it'll show here in a second a comparison against countries like our country, which did not take it seriously, and Italy and other places which didn't immediately quarantine when they should have. And you'll see that there's a correlation between the two graphs. And also,
okay, yeah. So and then he's taking the argument further. So not only can we notice population, not only have we recorded populations of people having this virus, but it seems to respond to certain social activities that those people engage in, like directly. So knowing that it's in aerosolized droplets in our saliva, wearing masks and social distancing, the areas that do that they have higher rates. The ones that don't have lower rates. So again, we're starting to understand the behavior of a very specific virus that clearly exists. It's just kind of like you might see a lion for the first time and you're just like, yes, lions exist. So we can break down their DNA, and they have a very specific genetic sequence that is different from other types of cats. It's different from tigers or any of those things. And then not only that, but we're starting to notice how its hunting behaviors are different. And gazelles who don't live in the area. I don't know. That I'm going to stupid places with this at this point, but yeah, that is we're starting to notice specific features of that species. Then that again validates that species existing.
So also, what they're also saying is that the initial data from China, let's say that we had this initial data from China. China was.
I also have to backstep. I wouldn't. There's a huge conversation about what a virus is. Is it living or not living? So I don't actually mean like I'm not conflating that with like biology at all. I don't mean like. Actually, I'd be interested what the deal is there. Like, are viruses considered species or variants? Just variants and not species? I don't know.
The first one that had the outbreaks, first one to go into quarantine. So if their data reflects the data that other countries are getting, then the only conclusions you would have was either the virus is real or China knew in advance what other countries' data or charts were going to look like and data was going to look like and mimic the data themselves in advance time. So we would have to have an inside knowledge of future data observations from countries that had not yet experienced the pandemic versus what China was doing in real time. And this is going to show you right here. Here it's about to show you to you right here. As you can see, it's relatively the same, relatively the same. So you get, and I'm trying to paraphrase for what Thunderfoot's saying right here. So yeah, so what he says right here is after looking at all these graphs, what's your proposal? Are they faking this ahead of time? Did they fake the data ahead of time before they ever had the data from South Korea or USA or UK or Italy? Did China know ahead of time they were going to have those same data spreads? And did they?
Right, and then also this lends to Occam's razor, which is put poorly, the simplest observation or the simplest conclusion is usually the correct one, but it's probably better phrased as the conclusion that best fits all the considered data is usually the correct one. And so what we have is a situation where the reports that are coming out of all of these nations are closely related to each other. They seem to be indicating something very specific happening. And so which one's more likely that the virus actually does exist and that people are getting sick from it or being hospitalized or dying in ways that are very close to each other in terms of, again, what we understand about the virus, but then also, that's pretty much it. Based on what we understand about the virus, its ability, how contagious it is, how deadly it is, how harmful it is. All of these nations, I guess you would have to assume that not only these nations, but the medical professionals that are reporting these, they're all collaborating and just getting it exactly right. All their numbers are statistically pretty close to each other in a way that indicates that this thing exists. And we're going to say, no, that's not actually true, and the virus doesn't exist. And that what's actually happening is that they are meeting on the weekends or the weekdays, or there's some huge collaboration behind everybody's back to make all these things look true. You get to a point of like, which one's more likely that this thing that is way more complicated and would be hard to pull off realistically, never been done before, really, at least in terms of ways that we have good evidence for, that there's some huge conspiracy involving hundreds of millions of people, or just that the virus does actually exist and is on some level harmful, on some level deadly, so on and so forth. So again, seems fine to me.
That were they able to, extrapolate backwards so that they could lie? Unfortunately, the only other option is to believe that the virus is in fact real, and it affects, it's going to affect people in China the same way it affects people in South Korea, the same way that it affects the spread rate all over the world. Okay. All right. So let me get back to my presentation. All right. So the purpose of
I'm gonna skip. I think I might skip.
Let's see. So as you can see, for the novel coronavirus to be a hoax, it would have had to be planned and executed all around the world without a single world leader coming forward to admit such corruption.
And also on top of that, again, like I'm saying, so it seems we are on the same page because he's confirming what I'm saying. or he seems to be on this. I'm on his page. I understand what he's saying, and he is in fact validating like there are specific features of this virus and contracting this virus that are you can see in the data, you can see in the information. They have similar that all the nations have similar patterns with each other, and so this idea that either they're collaborating on a scale that we don't know or haven't seen, or like they're getting really lucky and just everything really being close to the same, and the infection rates seem very similar, the death rates seem very similar within like 1 to 2%. That's still argued to this day. It would be amazing if they were exactly correct. That's not the way the flu is, right, in different locations. But the fact that you can observe the specific behavior of this virus lends to that thing existing. It lends credibility to that thing existing.
And the data from China would have had to be manipulated in such a way that it would be consistent with unknown future data from other countries, even those that are world power rivals. So without a doubt, the virus is real. But the question we're now faced with,
again, or so what's more likely, that this virus exists, or like countries that at least at the very least seem to really hate each other and disdain each other are collaborating together? Which one's more likely, that the virus exists, or these two countries that even go to war with each other? There are assassination attempts on leaders of the other people, that they've let bygones be bygones so that they can all control the people. And again, China's information is coming out earlier, so that China somehow knows how all the other nations are going to react, that none of them are going to rat out China and say, no, this thing is ridiculous, it's not real, or that the virus exists. That's just that takes way less that takes way less information for it to be true. That's actually how you want to view Occam's razor, by the way. It's the conclusion that takes less extra information for it to be correct. Like, you would have to assume more things that you don't know for it to be correct. The explanation that takes less of that takes less of information we don't have in order to connect those dots, is usually the correct one. So it would take more information. You would have to have, if you want to say that there's some huge unification of all the governments and conspiracy to control the populace, well then, now we need like phone calls and emails and record data. By the way, also all the hospitals. So now we need information from nurses and doctors saying that they're lying about these things. You need all that information now because we don't have it. Really, we would want that to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this is in fact going on. But we don't have that information, so we are now being asked in some way to assume it, or being asked to assume that really all that stuff's going on behind our backs, and that takes information that we don't have. So that's the least likely scenario. You don't have to assume anything extra going based off of us knowing that the coronavirus has a specific genetic sequence, that hospitals and doctors and nurses are reporting very specific things occurring in certain portions of the population all across the world. Government officials are compiling that data even more and giving kind of metadata or macro information that is further converging with all these other countries that, hey, here's what the coronavirus is, here's how it behaves, this is what it's doing to the population, this is this percentage of the population that's dying based off of their age range, or just very specific things. All information we have doesn't take any other assumptions. That's the one you should go with, obviously, right? It's like if you live in America, the old kind of thought experiment is, if you live in America and you hear something with hooves outside, you assume that it is a horse and not a zebra. And why do you do that? Maybe it is a zebra, right? But for it to be a zebra, what would have to have happened? something, maybe there's a zoo nearby you and the zebra got loose and nobody saw that zebra to catch it before, that zebra just evaded absolutely everybody. Or somebody took a zebra and flew it to America and it just happened to be outside your house. You would have to assume a lot more than just, oh, well, horses are actually very common. Like if you live in a rural area, let's say, right? Just like horses are common and somebody's horse left their stable that's close by, not like escaped a zoo, right? You have to assume you have to assume less things in order for it to be a horse than you do for it to be a zebra. You have to assume a lot more information and a lot crazier information for it to be a zebra. Again, stuff that we should be talking about in schools. We don't, but I guess it is what it is.
Is it as dangerous as the world is telling us? According to the Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Resource Center, there have been about 1.1 million deaths with about 27.1 million recoveries across the globe. This means that for every 25 patients who recover, one does not, or about 4%. According to the CDC, and let me show you this right here. This is Johns Hopkins data right here. According to the CDC, from October 1st, 2019 to April 4th, 2020, an estimated 39 million to 56 million Americans contracted the flu, resulting in an estimated 24 to 62,000 deaths. If we take their lowest estimate on infections and their highest estimate on deaths, then we get the highest possible mortality rate of about 0.1%, which is still 40 times less than the mortality rate of COVID-19.
Yeah, so this goes to, again, that argument that this is the flu. So there are arguments being made, there were anyway, that this was the flu, and the rates just aren't the same. The argument being made is this is the flu. Well, how do you know it's the flu? Well, because it's not really killing a significant amount of people. If it's not killing a significant amount of people, then it can't be like the flu, or then it must be like the flu. And this is really not delving into, okay, what does significant mean? Like, where's the threshold for significance? And again, if you have like an emotional reaction to things, you just believe what you want to believe, thinking about what significance isn't important to you. It's like what I was saying earlier with the meme where somebody had said, basically that the vaccination did not provide immunity. It's just like you didn't care enough about what was true to go look up what immunity means, because just because you can get something doesn't mean that you're not immune from it. Immune is about resistance. Okay. And so it's the same thing here. Like, this was also done. It's just like, oh, well, the rates are low, and the rates for flu have been high some seasons, so that's now comparing something that's unusually high to something that's unusually low. But also, the rates of flu, as everybody was wearing their masks and as everybody was was distancing socially, was much lower than it usually even is, than it's typical. So calling this the flu is to completely ignore how transmissible it is, how on average how deadly it is, on average how many people, and this is something that isn't talked about. I was actually in a group a couple weeks ago, no, actually last week, and it really surprised me to be, and these are smart people, they were talking about how, one person was talking about how they thought that this was overblown, and maybe it is. I'm also not here to argue that it was or wasn't. But luckily there was a medical professional there, and one thing that nobody had thought about, which I also found when I'm talking to people, nobody thought about. It's a bad indication when I'm hearing people who want to doubt the coronavirus or want to doubt how harmful it is. Everybody talks about deaths. Nobody talks about how many people are going to be permanently disfigured after. So they're going to survive, right? But their lungs will never be the same. They won't be able to do certain jobs. They'll have to rely on medication or medical assistance. They're going to die in an earlier age, so they may not just immediately have died from it. And then someone in the room is just like, oh, I didn't even think of that. And it's just like, yeah, that's important to think about too. So now, okay, let's say it's 1%, or let's say it's 0.6%. I got in this argument with this guy all the time, and he just never got when I said, like, You are talking about one person, or you're talking about one organization or one organization reporting 0.6%. Okay, there are a bunch of organizations reporting different numbers, so it's fallacious, it's dishonest to just look at that one number that's reporting what you want it to be and say, well, that's what it is, even though hundreds of organizations are putting out data. It's just like, wouldn't you want to take all of that data and come up with maybe some type of average of what it is? No, he doesn't want to do that. And he just kept reiterating that it was 0.6, even though I'm giving him 20 organizations saying that some are saying it's 0.6, some are saying it's 1%, some are saying it's 2%. It's also going to change throughout time. It's going to depend on how many people are socially distancing. It's going to depend on how many people are wearing masks. It's going to depend on how our healthcare system changes to deal with that, which is another effect we saw as we learned how the virus worked. The deaths plummeted, and that's because people figured out better ways to take care of the people that were in the hospital as they learned how the virus worked, as they learned what the likely symptoms were, and as they learned ways to alleviate those symptoms. So that also changed. Damn, where was I going with this? So yeah, the point is, I think overall comparing it to the flu is pretty dishonest. It's to not really care about what the actual numbers are and compare them and say like, okay, what's it doing that is really the same as the flu? Fair enough, but what's it doing that's also different from the flu that we need to be paying attention to? To me, seems like a much fairer, if somebody's talking along those lines, they want to look at all the information and not just one piece of information or a couple pieces of information. I'm going to go, okay, the person who wants to look at all the information is being honest and actually cares about what the truth is. This person who's trying to look at very specific pieces of information that confirms what they're saying, I don't trust them as much. Yeah, so we had a large group of people who were against coronaviruses or were saying that it wasn't harmful, that again weren't looking at not just the people that die, but the people that become permanently harmed, or I don't want to say disfigured, but that have permanent issues for the rest of their life because of it, which is going to be a different number at different rates. Again, it's a signal to me like, okay, I trust the people, or I'm not as trusting of people who want to say that this is like the flu or want to say that this isn't significant, because every time I hear them say that, they seem to be leaving out information or using fallacies, and the groups that saying that it is significant aren't using it as much. And so I'm going with that.
And let's not forget that COVID-19 deaths are more than likely being underreported. According to the CDC, and I'll bring this stat up right here, 1 second. Okay, according to the CDC, from October 1st, 2019 to April 4th, 2020, an estimated 39, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I already said that. Okay. Let me go back to the next part. All right, and let's not forget that COVID-19 deaths are more than likely being underreported. According to the CDC, from February 1st, 2020 to October 10th, 2020, there have been 204,613 deaths from COVID-19. Out of 2,226,473 total deaths in America over that same time period. According to the CDC estimates, the 2,226,473 deaths is 12% above what is expected. See, the expected death estimates would be off if there was a new deadly pathogen this year that was not present last year.
Okay, so I think that so he's now given a different argument here that the numbers are, I think, let's see if he qualifies it again. I'm interested in the ability of the people making the arguments to reason, to demonstrate that they understand how we can reliably build knowledge, what fallacies are, what logic is. So I'm going to go back because I just want to hear it one more time. If he says that they're likely underreported, he now gets credit for me because he understands that it doesn't mean just because the death rates are higher this year than the previous one doesn't mean that they were all caused by coronavirus. So the argument that he's making here is that the numbers were likely underreported. Well, how do you know? It's because there has been a change from the previous year to this year that in terms of the discrepancy, that discrepancy is higher than the amount of deaths we know have occurred due to COVID. So to put this simply, if we know 10 people have died of COVID, just again putting this simply, but we look to the previous year and the amount of deaths that have occurred just generally, we notice that in addition to that, those 10 COVID deaths that have been added to this year's death rate, we also notice that there's an additional 50 deaths. And so that can be some indication that not all the COVID deaths are being reported. And in fact, we know some people don't go to the hospital, so it doesn't get reported. This is just stuff we know, right? So those numbers aren't going to be in the system. This does not account for, say, other factors like maybe somebody committing suicide because of mental health issues. Like, what other factors may also be exacerbating that number, even though it's not directly people getting COVID and dying. But there are things that the coronavirus has disrupted that are causing deaths in a different way. Is something else. But if he's saying it's likely, then he's qualified his statement. He's not saying for sure those deaths are coronavirus deaths, so we know it's being underreported. If he's saying it's likely underreported, then again, that indicates that he understands the relationship between the data that he's giving and the claim he wants us to accept. So let's see.
Are more than likely being underreported.
Are more than likely being underreported. So again, and I don't hear this same understanding. I do not hear these same things from people who want to doubt the coronavirus or say that it doesn't exist or say that it's like the flu. I'm not hearing the word likely. I'm not hearing an understanding between how their data relates to the claims that they can make. So he seems to accurately understand that we can likely draw a conclusion that all these additional deaths may very well be coming from the coronavirus. We can't know that for sure because, again, there are other ways that the coronavirus could have made other situations worse, or also that it's just coincidental. People don't die the same rates every year, right? So, it's not like every year just 100 people die. It changes. So maybe this year was just a high year for other different reasons, but it's so high. His argument is that it's so high that obviously some of these have to be coming from COVID deaths not being reported. And I will also say that I understand, when I first heard this, my mind is immediately like, that's not necessarily true. But when somebody uses the word likely, I'm like, okay, I can get on board with that. You're showing that you understand that this isn't definitive.
According to the CDC, and I'll bring this stat up right here, 1 second. 1st, 2020 to October 10th, 2020, there have been 204,613. Look at a country who is not only one of America's greatest allies, but also a country that is located near ground zero on the Asian continent. And that would be South Korea. Unlike the American politicians and scientifically ignorant American public who chose to downplay or even outright deny the potential harm that this virus could do to us, the South Korean government and their citizens took the virus seriously from day one, instituting and enforcing self-quarantine and social distancing restrictions. The result, in a country of more than 50 million people, they've had a total of 443 deaths. Whereas America...
Yeah, so lower deaths. People who... So again, we have the argument here. The virus exists. How do you know? Because populations that treat the virus as if it exists do better handling the virus than populations that doubt its existence or severity or any of those things. That's again an indication that it does actually exist, that it and is on some level harmful. Keeping in mind, just to be clear about my own position on all this, like throughout the pandemic, I wasn't worried about dying or getting sick. I was worried about people that I care about dying and getting sick. And if you didn't, then, a lot of these people that I meet, they're either ignorant in a lot of respects or they're also selfish too. But I was concerned about people in my life who I know are at risk or in age brackets in which they're predisposed to die or to be hurt much more than I am in terms of being young and healthy. I just didn't think the chances were that great that I would die, and again, or even be like hurt. It does happen, but it's so insignificant. That's when I think you start to think about like, okay, how afraid of the flu would I be versus this? I think that's where that argument can start to come in and be made a little bit. But really my concern lied with other people that I knew were at risk. And that's stuff you consider too, as just being a good person.
Is well over 200,000 deaths in a country of 330 million people. That gives America about 400 times more deaths while only being a little more than 6 times as big in population.
Yeah, we're not, I'm skipping a lot of this, but yeah, we have issues as Americans. Our education system just is not doing what it needs to do. And now some Americans are unfortunately paying for that. And they're making other people pay for it too. I guess, the saying, you reap what you sow type deal. I mean, ideally we would just learn to educate people better, but also, if you're the type of person that doesn't care whether they hurt other people, and doesn't really think about that, doesn't doubt themselves, I always look for humility, who's being humble here. So if you just don't doubt what you know and you don't seek information to try to disconfirm what you think, not constantly try to confirm what you think, and you're harming other people in that process, then it is one of those things that's like, you do reap what you sow, and the Republican Party is, I actually looked at a list the other day. It was very interesting. I could share it if anybody is in fact interested, but basically it's only been only Republicans have died at the federal level. Only Republicans have died at the only Republican politicians, have died at the federal level and the state level. It's only when you start looking at the local level do some Democrats die, but it's still a lot of Republicans. So it's just like, well, at least like they're following it out. Like at this point, they did hurt a lot of people that were trying to protect themselves or were at risk or couldn't get the vaccine. They did selfishly or ignorantly ignore that. But on the same token, at this point, a lot of them are dying. And it's like, okay, well, at least like you followed out your convictions. Let's say you followed out your convictions, and a lot of Republicans died and are dying. And now it's starting to change, which it's like, well, that's good because I generally don't like people dying, but also it is a bit disturbing that it's just like, oh, okay, so only when it affects you do you really start to care about the thing. I don't think it's going to matter. I think they're really going to pay in the long term for thoughts like that, or for their pride and being unempathetic. But I want to go to the other person. Let's see if we can compare how the other person is arguing versus the way this next person is going to argue. And maybe this next person will be a good arguer and will change my mind.
The thing you ended up with really was going to hurt you.
So let me stop share with that, guys. I want to start my presentation.
Oh, okay, hold on. Let's go back.
To them,
all right, one more video. Deaths. Now this video is extra special because this is Kerry Mullis, the creator and inventor of the PCR test that's being used to diagnose.
Okay, I must have stopped there.
Going into the opening statement of conspiracy.
No, I haven't. Oh yeah, my opening statement. Okay, I thought you were sorry about that, James.
So,
I was confused. Sorry.
No problem. So thanks, Team Skeptic, for that opening. And conspiracy Castle, the floor is all yours.
Okay, so one thing is I'd like to start my presentation. So I have 10 minutes uninterrupted. I'd like to start it with a video, with two-minute videos. So it's 4 minutes, and then I'll have like to present after it. So should I? Let me share my screen.
You got it.
Oh shoot! I don't know if I did share with audio. Hold on. Let me. Let's see. Let's see if you can hear the audio. I don't think I did it. Let me do stop share. Hold on. Share screen. share computer sound. There we go. All right. Okay, and so for starting off, guys, I'd like to say, I really appreciate your presentation, Team Skeptic. I think that was a good job. I could tell that you typed that, you were reading that, and not going off the dome. That's a little different than what I'm going to be doing, but I'd like to start off my presentation with, this is a video of the guy that created the PCR test, and this test is actually what's being used to diagnose the coronavirus, and even he said that this test is not sufficient in diagnosing the coronavirus. So if I can get my freaking internet to go. Here, we can start with this video first. This is explaining all the fake deaths and all the...
Okay, so again, we have our argument here. I'm not going to beat this up too much because I imagine he's going to make other arguments. But the argument is basically that the coronavirus is the coronavirus is being over exaggerated. So again, that's where there's like a discrepancy between what the debate is even about. But anyway, the coronavirus is being over exaggerated. Well, how do you know? Well, because the person who invented the test that people use to determine the coronavirus says it's not sufficient for doing that. And so then the reasoning then is, if a person who invented something says that the thing that they invented isn't best used for what he invented it for, then that must be true. And I can see the pros and cons in that argument. So I would say some people will probably see that like that's a bit ridiculous. Just because somebody who invented something doesn't mean that they are the ultimate arbiter of whether or not that thing can be used for different things. At the same time, he is still, it sounds like, a professional, and he may be giving strong arguments as to why that's the case. And to me, that warrants listening to it, at least listening to what he has to say.
The misinformation that you're hearing on the news.
COVID-19 in order to make, they were saying, can
you see it, James? I don't know if you can see it on the screen.
We can see it and we can hear it. There is a little bit of like static that's coming through with it.
There is. Let me turn on the gain. Let's see. But see, I'm looking at the screen. Okay, now you can see it. Okay, we'll start off with this video
have
first.
A confirmed laboratory test for COVID-19 in order to make the death certificate be COVID-19.
The state says its current COVID-19 death count includes anyone that is tested positive for COVID-19. There are several cases where someone clearly died from something else, like a gunshot wound.
They're writing COVID on all of the death certificates, whether they had a positive test, whether they didn't.
One person reported to have died from COVID was killed in a motorcycle accident.
It wasn't COVID. It was alcohol toxicity. Yes, he did have COVID, but that is not what took his life.
If you were in hospice and had already been given, a few weeks to live, and then you also were found to have COVID, that would be counted as a COVID death. It means...
Yeah, I remember watching this video too. And this one's difficult because what we have here are a bunch of... One issue is that they're anecdotal. So we have people saying, well, this happened. It's just like, okay... I understand you're saying it happened, but who's the coroner on this? Where's the person who actually had to diagnose this person or give their cause of death? Where is that? I'm more interested in that than somebody just telling me, oh, well, a guy was, on a motorcycle or got into a motorcycle wreck, and it was pronounced a COVID death. And then the other issue here that I've noticed, that again, people who doubt the coronavirus don't seem to be considering all of the information, or they're very specifically focusing on certain types of information. Don't seem to understand that it's always an issue for medical professionals and coroners or medical examiners to determine the cause of death. It's equal. That's not the best way to put that. Sorry, it's not equal, but that's always an issue, right? So like if somebody is a smoker and they have lung cancer, right? And they smoke a cigarette, and after they smoke that cigarette, their health declines. Can you say that that cigarette had a factor in their death? Would they have survived if they had not smoked that cigarette? It gets harder to call. Okay, it doesn't mean that the cigarette didn't cause their death or wasn't a cause of the death. That may be different from like it being the main reason they died. But like somebody is very sick and they're driving, and somebody's very sick from the coronavirus, which attacks your lungs. Okay, and they die in a car wreck, and the medical professionals are trying to intubate this person or doing things to help this person survive, and it's very clear that the damage that has occurred to their lungs due to the coronavirus is exacerbating their ability to save this person. And they do believe that in the circumstance where this person had not had coronavirus, they would have likely been able to save that person. That's a call they have to make. And it's the same if they had the flu or anything else. It would be the exact same. They have to make that call. There's a lot of discussion about how hospitals are funding, and again, when it comes down to the particularities of the information, there's just a lot of lies, which again steers me away from people saying that this is a hoax or it's not as bad as people are making it out to be. And it very well, and the other thing is I'm completely fine with saying that it is most certainly, I would bet my account on it, not as bad as some people are making it out to be. I would absolutely bet that there are people who have medical conditions, or I'm sorry, that have mental conditions that are over-exaggerating their likelihood of dying from it. Right, so it's just like I'm completely fine with even saying that, but the idea that there's some huge conspiracy around all these medical professionals and they're all over exaggerating. Like one of the things is that like doctors get paid more if they diagnose the coronavirus. I've heard like a friend say this, and it's just like I've heard other people say that, and when I went to research it, it's more like hospitals would be given resources to take care of that person, but they also lose funding. By the way, they will also lose funding if they come to understand that that wasn't true. They could also lose credibility. Let's not talk about that. The fact that there's something on the line for them if they're caught lying about some of these things, they could lose their license. Who knows? Maybe they just, in abundance, doctors just care about money more than they do having sustain income over time. Who knows? There's just a bunch of gamblers out there. But the idea is that like if somebody gets sick from the coronavirus and there are and the hospital's given money, funding, or resources to take care of that sick person, if that sick person, let's say, gets better within 10 days, okay, and then leaves, right, but then comes back because they're still sick and they still need those resources, the government will then penalize that hospital for that scenario. So that really behooves medical professionals making sure that people are in fact better before they leave, because the hospital knows that there are consequences and repercussions for lying about these things. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but to just openly talk as if there's everything to gain for these hospitals to lie about this thing and nothing to lose is dishonest. And again, it steers me away from groups of people who make those types of arguments. It makes me think that they don't really know what they're talking about, and they're not so much concerned about the truth as much as they are having their emotions and their ideas validated, which I'm just not particularly interested in. I'm not interested in that line of thinking. I'm not interested in being a part of those groups.
That if technically, even if you died of a clear alternate cause, but you had COVID at the same time, it's still listed as a COVID death.
Deaver said he's been trying to get the state.
Yeah. So again, these are a few people saying these things. This isn't data, like large scale data collected from a bunch of hospitals, a bunch of medical professionals, a bunch of organizations putting data together and reporting numbers. This is anecdotal information of certain people saying this seems to be occurring. We also had it wasn't Dr. Dixon, I can't remember her name, but she was one of the medical professionals consulting with Dr. Birx. Yeah, Dr. Birx with Donald Trump, and then she thought that the numbers were being over exaggerated about 25%. That is one medical professional. I'm really interested in what a body of medical professionals thinks. I don't think it's insignificant that she thinks that. I think that's something to look into. I just don't think it's the end all be all. And a lot of people seem to think that it is, which again makes me doubt them. It makes me think like, oh, okay, you're not interested in the truth. Like you're just interested in having your emotions validated and whatever you think validated.
State Health Department to explain how a case of fatal alcohol poisoning was classified as a COVID death.
We're not the first case of this happening.
Oh, absolutely not.
How often do you think this has happened?
Quite a lot. Quite a lot.
So,
yeah, and I think, you take all these reports, you see how many there are, right? You put a number or a figure on it, and you publish it. And then it becomes more significant. Because right now, even taking like the 10 people we've heard talk, right? There's roughly 33.5 million people in the US. So 10 is just not a very significant number. That's not to say that we shouldn't investigate it, that hospitals that are doing this shouldn't be reported or penalized. They already do have some of those things going on. And in fact, like fraud happens everywhere. It's just, on what scale is it happening? What are our reasons for believing it? It's kind of like saying, like if somebody wanted to prove that like an individual was a murderer, or even a group of people was a murderer. And so they started talking about all the murders that happen in the US. And it's just like, okay, yes, murder happens. You still bear the burden of proof of showing that demonstrably this group as a whole has a bunch of murderers in their organization, as opposed to like no murderers, which would, well, no, that might not be it. Murder may not be the best analogy here. Let's say like thievery, right? Like it would be amazing if you had like 100,000, 200,000 people in an organization. There's more medical professionals than that. So let's say millions, let's say millions of medical professionals, and not one of them lied, in the same way that it would be amazing if you had like a whole state in which nobody lied. Like that would be amazing, right? So it's not so much about wondering whether or not it happens. It's about knowing the prevalence of the thing to know whether or not you have an issue. Like if you wanted to point the finger at like Maine and say, Maine is full of liars. Okay, well, what's your data? Well, I know some people in Maine and they lie. And it's just like, okay, that's pretty, again, you don't seem to understand the relationship between data and the claim you want to make. We want, if you really want to say that lying is such a huge issue in Maine, you need to compile all those anecdotal instances. You need a way to record them, and then you need to publish it. And it's just like, oh crap, 90% of people in Maine are lying. Okay, well now you have an issue. Now you have actually proven that there's in fact an issue. This is anecdotal information. So it's problematic to see stuff like this for me. Well, it should be problematic for anybody, really.
Everyone who's listed as a COVID death doesn't mean that was the cause of the death, but they had COVID at the time of death.
The state counts every person who tests positive for COVID-19 and then dies, even if the death was not caused by COVID-19.
I've seen people, say COVID in the family, somebody never tested, we don't know, and they write it anyway. They don't even have to prove it.
It's not the first time the state health department has come under fire for reclassifying deaths as COVID fatalities. 3 deaths were not related to coronavirus. But since the residents had tested positive for COVID-19, the state then listed them as coronavirus
one more video.
deaths.
Now, this video is extra special because this is Kerry Mullis, the creator and inventor of the PCR test that's being used to diagnose the coronavirus.
All these supposed free viral RNAs that may or may not be there.
I think misuse PCR is not quite. I don't think you can misuse PCR. No, the results, the interpretation of it. See, if you can say, if they could find this virus in you at all, and with PCR, if you do it well, you can find almost anything in anybody. It starts making you believe in the sort of Buddhist notion that everything is contained in everything else, right? I mean, because if you can amplify one single molecule up to something that you can really measure, which PCR can do, then there's just very few molecules that you don't have at least one single one of them in your body, okay? So that could be thought of as a misuse of it, just to claim that it's meaningful. It is. No, there's very little of what they call HIV, and what's been brought out here by Philpott and Eli already. The measurement for it is not exact at all. It's not as good as our measurement for things like apples. An apple is an apple. You know, you can get something that's kind of like, if you got enough things that look kind of like an apple and you stick them all together, you might think it's an apple. And HIV is like that. The tests are all based on things that are invisible, and the results are inferred.
The results are
PCR
inferred.
is separate from that.
Okay, I just want to make sure. There's like a double overlap with audio. It's awful, but whatever. Yeah, so the results are inferred. Okay, so did he just say... Okay, so what is this guy? Conspiracy Castle. Did he just say the results are inferred as if like that was a bad thing? We go back. He seemed to like emphasize that like the results are inferred, and it's like, yeah, we use inferences all the time, and they're completely legitimate given certain circumstances. So if he thinks that something is false because it's been inferred, that would be a bad sign to me. It sounds like this person is saying something that I think is interesting. And something we should keep in mind. It's just like, okay, yeah, so we need to keep in mind that we may very well misunderstand the severity of coronavirus impacting somebody's health or death in a certain way. Something to look out for. But in terms of this arguer, let's go back a little bit.
Like apples. An apple is an apple.
Which I understand, and that's fair.
You know, you can get something that's kind of like, if you got enough things that look kind of like an apple and you stick them all together, you might think it's an apple. And HIV is like that. The tests are all based on things that are invisible, and the results are inferred.
The results are inferred.
PCR is separate from...
Yeah, he did. He just tried to emphasize the fact that they were inferred as if that made them untrue or invalid, which is different from them just not being absolute in the way that we understand deductive reasoning not being absolute. It's like... if you run into 100 white swans or no, that's not going to be a good example. Every human you have ever met, as far as you know, has died or is going to die. You've observed dead bodies. You've observed people saying that they're dying. You don't know that you have not observed every human being that has ever existed die yourself. That's not an observation you've made. You have to infer that all humans die. So, well, it's an inference. So, it's an inference. So therefore, humans don't really all die. It would be a bit like saying that. Like it would be. That's different from saying, yes, we have to concede that we haven't seen all humans die, and who knows? Maybe one day they won't die. Maybe there will be a way to permanently defeat death. But that doesn't mean that saying that humans die, inferring that all humans die now is incorrect.
From that, it's just a process that's used to make a whole lot of something out of something. That's what
Also,
it is. But it's not. It doesn't tell you that you're sick, and it doesn't tell you that the thing you ended up with really was going to hurt you.
So let me stop share with that, guys. I want to start my presentation, and I have 6 minutes left. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, my name is Alexander Stein, and guys, what is going on in America right now is the biggest transition of power in the world, and they are using a virus. That's right, the coronavirus, which has existed ever in the entire world. It's been on Lysol bottles. The coronavirus did not just come into existence in 2020, and the guy that invented the test even said that it's not sufficient enough in diagnosing the coronavirus. So if you wait...
Okay, so it sounds like he's being interrupted, which isn't good, but this right here is like, it's red flags, right? The coronavirus has always existed, and it's just like, yes, things mutate, right? So like, we're not like, it's like if there was, it's like chicken pox. Like chicken pox has always existed, right? And chicken pox was harmful at one point, so it must be harmful now, right? Because it's not like things change. This is a genetic fallacy. Coincidentally enough, it's a genetic fallacy, right? So coronavirus has always existed and hasn't been harmful, therefore it's not harmful now. It's actually almost directly a genetic fallacy. Like, not ironically, that would be the wrong word to use, but interestingly enough, He is acting as if viruses do not mutate and they don't naturally gain function in ways that can be very harmful to humans. It has happened a lot. It will continue to happen a lot. So again, red flag in terms of me thinking that this person understands reasoning and fallacies and logic enough for me to think maybe there's more to their conclusions than I'm not seeing. Like sometimes I'll give people the benefit, like there are people that I know and they're like using reasoning really well and I won't agree with their conclusion, but I will continue to listen because as far as I can see, they seem to understand reasoning. So I'm just like, okay, there must be something here I'm missing. With this guy, I would assume that there is nothing missing apart from him just not understanding, like not having done a lot of research on like epistemology or philosophy or logic or any of these things.
Wake up and you listen to what's really happening in society. They are using this virus in order to manipulate us and put us in what is called trauma-based mind control.
I hate to interrupt, but there's some sort of voice echo in the background. I can't tell where it's coming from. Do you happen to have a... Oh, there it goes. It's off.
There we go. Sorry. Let me start that over, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, get back to what I'm saying. So the coronavirus, guys, is provably false. The coronavirus has been on Lysol bottles in years past. So what people are dying from, when you look at the 200,000 deaths, even the CDC says 94% of those deaths had 2.6 pre-existing comorbidities. So people are dying of other stuff, of diabetes, of heart attacks. And even we watch the video, people are dying of gunshot wounds. People are drowning, and they are mislabeling people as COVID.
Yeah, so again, the question to answer is, the question that the medical professional has to answer is, would that person die if coronavirus, the novel coronavirus, hadn't been an issue? That's and if you want to claim that medical professionals are lying about that, you have a much larger burden of proof than some instances of people saying that in fact they are. I'm talking about generally speaking. If you want to prove generally that medical professionals are lying about these things, you adopt a very high burden of proof that would take statistics and like recorded data, not just some people saying that it happened. So again, not meeting his burden of proof, misunderstanding, or seemingly not having heard of the genetic fallacy, bad signs.
COVID deaths, because in America, compared to these other countries, we have a private healthcare system where they have a public healthcare system. So we are facing the biggest insurance scam of all time when hospitals get $39,000 for every time they diagnose a corona patient on a ventilator. And on top of that, they get $19,000 even with just a coronavirus diagnosis. So put it this way, this is an insurance scam, and these private big pharma companies can actually benefit here in America.
Yeah, and again, could be true. Would take a lot of data that I have not seen yet. So that is his claim, that this is a big scam. These anecdotal pieces of information of some people saying that that's what's going on is not data. It's not statistics, which is what you would need to prove something like this.
Unlike these other countries that have,
there's no reports of, it's like you can lose your license for malpractice. Or malpractice probably isn't the best word, but for lying about significant things in the medical field. So like all these doctors are just putting their license on the line, or it seems far-fetched.
Public medicine. So when you look at it, this is a transfer of wealth, and you see Jeff Bezos is making all the money and all these small businesses are closing, and you say a mask can protect you from a deadly virus. If a pair of Levi's can't stop a fart, how do you think a cloth mask is going to stop a deadly?
Yeah, so false analogy. Again, another issue here. A fart is not a virus. Like it's just like a fart can't stop genes. Yeah, or genes can't stop a fart. Yeah, well, farts aren't viruses, and genes aren't things that we like talk out of in the face of another human being. So it's just like really bad, horrible analogies. We're talking about aerosol, and this is another thing, like when I'm talking to people who doubt coronavirus, like I have to explain the idea of like aerosolized saliva, aerosolized moisture carrying over onto another person and it getting into any of the canals that are in the face, right? So the fact that he's using this false analogy is, again, just a huge sign that I just take this person less seriously, and I'm not willing to do as much digging into some of the other things that he's saying, because the issue here is clearly a matter of reason. He just has to, like, and I'm not trying to be condescending when I say this, but like, he's got to read books on epistemology. Like, we've had a conversation of how can we know what we know for thousands of years at this point, and we've come up with some pretty good answers. He doesn't seem to be privy to that conversation or its major conclusions. He doesn't seem to be privy in terms of understanding the intuitive things we've come up with to understand how we can claim to know something, and the ways that we know that we can be wrong about that. He doesn't seem to understand that. So he's yeah, this is kind of like an issue in pride to some degree, but I'll listen more just to see what else is going on here. But already, these red flags. And actually, while I'm on this topic, I guess, was there something else I wanted to say about this? Because again, this happens a lot when I'm talking to people who are talking about the coronavirus. They just end up talking in ways that's clear that they don't know what they're talking about, or they don't understand the things that I've said a million times they don't understand. So I'm not going to say it again. But what was the other thing?
Virus. These restrictions are absolutely insane. When you walk into a restaurant, at the reservation table, they make you put on a mask to walk to your table and immediately take it off. That's ridiculous. The cross-contamination.
That's not ridiculous. Again, so he doesn't seem to understand that, like, this would also be different if, like, there's an issue with practicality. So if you're going to eat, obviously you're going to take your mask off. Okay. But if you're walking by people and the mask that you have on is preventing droplets in your mouth from going into their mouth, that's going to reduce your chances of exposure, which is also different from the amount of exposure, which also can be detrimental. It can impact whether or not you die, how sick you get, whether or not you get sick. So no, it would be kind of like saying, like, what's it called? Kevlar. Kevlar doesn't fully protect a person being shot, so you might as well just not. It's ridiculous. Look at all the other parts of your body that are still exposed, and you're going to tell someone to wear a bulletproof vest, right? And it's just like, that's really ignoring that it still does protect to some level, even though it's not perfect, right? Or, and then you're just going to go and just take that off somewhere else when you're in a different location. Well, yeah, because again, anything that's going to reduce your exposure to getting hit by bullets would be a good thing, right? So no, it makes perfect sense that that's the case. This also isn't, we're not having the conversation about, which was another huge issue, again, when I'm listening to people who doubt the coronavirus in some capacity or another, again, completely conceding that I would be pretty confident saying that some people do over exaggerate how harmful it is, this and that. I guess the other side of that is a lot of people who are saying this are doing it very emotional. Like, they're saying other people are, like, their emotions are blowing this out of proportion, but they themselves are, like, getting actively angry as I'm talking to them about this, which is just like, okay, you obviously have emotional issues too, so chill, right? But hearing Dr. Fauci at one point say, like, we don't know that masks work yet, or let's not do that to now. It seemed evident to me that the timeline here is scientists were really hoping they could get people to socially distance, and we didn't have a lot of evidence on masks yet. All right, it became clear at some point that the public is too stupid, too selfish to do that. Okay, so what's plan B? They're obviously going to continue to go out anyway and meet. So what's plan B? Well, do masks work? Well, actually now that some places are wearing masks, we're showing that they work. Okay, now medical professionals are coming out and saying that it works. That's not a lie. That's just the development of facts, right? That's changing it's like hard for people who are stubborn or who have various issues to understand that your opinion changes with the information. So now we have information that masks work. Is it better that people, like, that's, if you go back and you listen to Fauci talking about these things, he's very clear that, like, we should just be distancing. That's really what they were trying to get people to do. It became clear that they weren't going to do that. And so, okay, now we need something else. It became masks and on some level still some social distancing. But it became about working around people's mental weaknesses, really. Their inability to just chill out for some time to save some lives. The inability of people to just not be selfish. And so we get to that point. You have, I remember one instance, Dr. Fauci saying that there's a risk that the corona, and you can go, like, there's videos of this. So what I'm saying is 100% the way that it is. You have people saying that Dr. Fauci lied about the rates of coronavirus increasing in Texas, and you go watch the video and he says, well, if people aren't social distancing and they're not wearing masks, there's a risk that it's going to increase in Texas. That's specifically what he said. At no point did he said absolutely 100% it's going to increase. Why? Because Dr. Fauci understands how knowledge works. He understands how to build it. And so people took him saying there's a risk that this thing could happen, and they changed it to he said absolutely it was going to happen, and the fact that it didn't happen just shows how stupid and unreliable or potentially how much he's lying. And it's just like you're demonstrating that you don't understand these things, because there's a difference between the risk of something happening and that thing actually, like, 100% it's going to happen, which he didn't say. So
contamination is the same as having a peeing section in a public swimming pool. These
are very, very bad arguments, bad analogies, right? I like the use of analogies. I think they can come in handy, but we are dealing with very different things here. He does not understand how viruses work, how big they are compared to other things, how they can be aerosolized, how masks can prevent that aerosolization, right? It's not like they're traveling through the air. It's aerosolized, right? So there needs to be a mixture of moisture and air, right? So if your mask is capturing the moisture components, it's just like it might not stop the air. That seems to be the argument he's making, is coronavirus travels through the air. No, it does not travel through the air. It travels through aerosolized containment. So it needs both air and moisture. And so your mask will prevent the moisture. It won't prevent the air, but good thing coronavirus doesn't just travel in the air. I mean, that's, again, he's demonstrating that he does not understand the reasoning.
Draconian laws and these efforts, these 6 feet social distancing, has not been proven to stop the spread of a virus. And they tell you that, but anything the CDC tells you is a lie. And you have the freaking president of the United States who doesn't.
That right there. So you notice how the other person, Team Skeptic, said it's likely that this happened. And then I switch over to a person. I need to know, like, who really understands the reasoning here. And so I can't just research every fact that they give. That's another issue that people seem to have, is just admitting that there are so many facts out there. To think that you're just going to do it all is pretty prideful and unrealistic. It also, again, it demonstrates a reasoning error. Instead of trying to figure out, okay, who understands the reason here, who understands logic or seems to understand these things, and then based off of that, who is more likely to use, or who is more likely to draw correct conclusions from their data. So again, Team Skeptic saying it's likely that we're underreporting because there were way more deaths from one year to the next. And so some of those, and then, he didn't say it, but also we've found people who have died, like, at their home and weren't reported. So it's possible that we're underreporting it to some degree, which doesn't mean we're not overreporting it. And then you get to him saying you can't trust anything that the CDC says, anything. Like, they haven't said one true thing. And again, now I'm in a position where it's just like, I'm going with Team Skeptic. I'm going because they seem to know better. They seem to know that to say something like that. I know some people are going to be like, he was just being hyperbolic or this and that. Well, it's on him as, like, a big boy and an adult to, like, point that. That happened a lot with, like, Donald Trump, or Donald Trump would say something and people would be like, well, he said this, but obviously he meant this. Okay, well, he's a big boy. So it's on him to say what he means and to articulate himself correctly, not on me to be a mind reader or to infer what he means. And then a lot of times people will say that, and, like, it's obviously not even what he meant. It's just the conclusion you have to draw for him to continue being right, so you can feel good about supporting that person. That happens way too often. But yeah, so I think I'm going to stop this here. That's, to me, the nail in the coffin on this. I'm still interested in this topic, so I may do it more because we're going through that issue now. But, you know, that finality of him saying you can't believe anything the CDC says. Not like you have to be careful about what you trust from the CDC for X and Y reasons. Just like a blanket to anything. Not one thing have they said that's true. That shows a huge inability to reason to me. Not qualifying his statements like that. But all right, that's what I got. And I will see everybody on Thursday, or somebody, maybe. I don't know. I'll be recording on Thursday, and I will also be putting out a video on Tuesday. So have a